and some fog patches, especially for Northern Ireland. But further east, we've got more cloud cover and so mostly frost-free, although a touch of ground frost and perhaps some frost on cars is still possible. Showers continuing, and those showers will spread into parts of the Pennines through the night and into the first part of the day on Friday. But otherwise, actually plenty of sunshine by the afternoon on Friday. Sunny spells more prevalent across England and Wales, I suspect, and for Scotland and Northern Ireland mostly dry, but later in the day we'll see rain arrive into the northwest of Scotland. The wind will pick up as well, so a damp and breezy end to the day for the Northwest Highlands and the Western Isles. That band of rain pushing south on Friday night, so with the cloud in the north, the frost-free night on the whole here, but a colder start on Saturday across England and Wales, then a bright day for many, windier on Sunday.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
.00 and this is Dewbs and Co, the show where we'll get into the things that have got you talking today. Now, are you middle-aged? And what age even is middle-aged these days? Anyway, I'm fascinated by that, but apparently the middle-aged are not voting Conservative any longer. Why? Just because of the things like the mess up around the whole mortgage, all the interest rates and things like that. Childcare is popping up. Are you one of these people? Would the Tories get your vote next time? And if not them, then who? And MPs that are accused of sexual misconduct, should they be barred from Parliament? Please note the use of my word accused there, because of course in this country we are indeed all innocent until proven guilty. Are we not? And do you drive a car, or at least attempt to drive a car these days? Because it's more difficult than ever, isn't it? I'm talking about things like low-traffic neighbourhoods, LTNs as they're called. They pop up absolutely everywhere. And now a council wants to turn 75% of its roads into these carless zones. What do you think to that? Is it all well-meaning, or is it just a kind of a war on cars to get you off them, onto your feet or onto your bike? Should it be the council that are getting on their bikes? Give me your thoughts. And well-meaning so-called charities. When it comes to this whole kind of channel crossing crisis now, do you think that these charities are helping or hindering? According to the French, they are hindering. Where do you stand on that? We'll get into all of that and more. But first, shall we bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines?
Michelle, thank you. Good evening to you. The top story on GB News tonight, the former Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi has given HMRC approval to release files relating to his tax affairs to be investigated by an independent monitor. It follows the Tax Accounts Chief Executive, Jim Harrer, telling MPs there are no penalties for innocent errors after being questioned before the Public Accounts Committee. The Tory party chairman is facing calls to resign after it emerged he had paid a penalty to HMRC while he was Chancellor. The Prime Minister says no issues were raised with him when he appointed Zahawi to his current role.
Because Nadhim Zahawi himself put a statement into the public domain and there was other reporting, there are questions to answer, and that's why I asked the independent advisor to conduct an investigation to fully establish the facts and provide advice to me about Nadhim Zahawi's compliance with the ministerial code.
At least 11 people have died in Russian missile strikes in Ukraine a day after the US and Germany pledged to supply the country with tanks and infantry fighting vehicles. More than 10 were wounded in the attacks, which covered 11 regions, including the capital, Kyiv. Germany's defence minister says he expects the first Leopard 2 tanks to arrive in Ukraine by the end of March. At the same time, the UK's Challenger 2 tanks are thought to be arriving. Russia has responded, with the Kremlin saying the deliveries of military hardware amounted to direct involvement in the conflict by the West. A member of Ukraine's parliament, Kira Rudik, told GB News sending tanks isn't enough.
A year into this war, we are still in this David versus Goliath situation, where Russia has more people, more weapons, more military production, more supplies. So we have to be different. We have to fight harder. We have to have more sophisticated weapons, and we have to use different strategies. And having tanks is one of those strategies.
Well, as you've been hearing all day on GB News, Scotland's First Minister has confirmed a transgender person convicted of rape will not be sent to an all-female prison. Earlier this week, Isla Bryson was found guilty of raping 2 women before choosing to change his gender to female. At First Minister's questions, Nicola Sturgeon addressed the row and whether or not Bryson should be held at Corton Vale Prison. She also confirmed a risk assessment has been carried out by the Scottish Prison Service.
It would not be appropriate for me, in respect of any prisoner, to give details of where they are being incarcerated. But given the understandable public and parliamentary concern in this case, I can confirm to Parliament that this prisoner will not be incarcerated at Corton Vale Women's Prison. And I hope that provides assurance to the public presiding officer, not least to the victims in this particular case.
Now, Andrew Bridgen has threatened to sue the former Health Secretary for defamation following an online post he retweeted about the COVID jab. Early this month, the North West Leicestershire MP was stripped of the Tory whip after retweeting a post by a consultant cardiologist which said the number of people suffering with heart problems after having the COVID vaccine was the biggest crime against humanity since the Holocaust. Matt Hancock referred to Bridgen's comments as anti-Semitic in the House of Commons, a statement that Bridgen has refuted. More doctors and nurses than ever are working in the NHS. Figures from NHS Digital show nearly 5,000 more doctors and 10,000 more nurses are working in the health service last year compared with the previous year. That comes as the government plans to recruit 50,000 more nurses by next year. Meanwhile, thousands of NHS physiotherapists in England have become the latest group to join the ongoing industrial action in the health service. A 24-hour walkout involves physios and their support staff at 30 trusts. It's the first time members of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy have gone on strike in a dispute over pay. It claims no new offer has been put forward, despite the government saying it is open to dialogue. And health workers in Northern Ireland are also staging a 24-hour walkout today. Members of 4 different unions are striking in a dispute over pay and conditions. Paramedics are among those involved. Unions say contingency arrangements are in place to ensure emergency care continues despite the strike action. And lastly, the King has been given a warm welcome during his first visit to the new Africa Centre in South London. His Majesty spoke to staff and visitors and heard how the centre provides a home away from home for Africans living in the UK. The new building is a former 1960s office block that's been transformed into a community hub for African culture and heritage. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Now back to Michelle with Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, I've got Lord Daniel Moylan, the Conservative peer in the House of Lords, and Laurie Laybourne, who is a policy researcher. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome.
Evening.
We've got matching glasses on almost today, Laurie.
I chose them on purpose.
Are you? What? You want to be more like me?
Yeah.
That's very flattering, isn't it? Thank you. Also, you know the drill, don't you, on Dewbs & Co? It's not just about us three with our matching glasses. It's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email, or you can tweet me at gbnews. A quick reminder, I want to talk to you about low-traffic neighbourhoods. Do you have them around you? Are you a pedestrian that quite likes them? Or are you a car driver that finds them a little bit infuriating, or a cyclist perhaps? It's somewhere in the middle. Also, I want to ask you about the charities. Are they helping or hindering this migrant crisis, the channel crossings? Your thoughts on that one? And MPs that are accused of sexual misconduct, should they be banned from the parliamentary estate? And if so, when? At the point of accusation, the point of arrest, the point of charge? I want your thoughts on that. And my top story I'll be getting into as well, about who will be voting Tory or not at the next election. And by the way, when is middle-aged? A happy birthday, by the way, speaking of age, to one of my regular viewers, Mickey, who turned 40 yesterday. I wonder if that puts you in the middle-age bracket these days or not. Get in touch with me, let me know your thoughts. Your girlfriend Lucy got in touch and asked me to wish you a happy belated birthday. I hope you spent it last night watching me. Where else? What else better to do on your 40th birthday than tune into Dewbs & Co? I say nothing, if you ask me. Right, let's move on and talk about voting, shall we? Who will you be voting for in the next general election? And how old are you, by the way? Because apparently middle-aged people are turning away from the Tories. This is all to do with this big study about the generational divides in this country. Middle-aged people, apparently those in their 40s and 50s, are turning away from the Tories. I found it quite astonishing that 40s is classed as middle-aged these days, but, you know, apparently it is. What do you think is going on? Because previously it would have been that if you're slightly older, you would have gravitated more towards the Tories. It seems now less so for things like the mortgage costs, the childcare issues, etc. Do you think this is concerning for the Tories or not?
Well, I'm looking forward to middle age, Michelle.
You're going to let me know when you get there, yeah?
I just want to get that in there right at the outset. I'm looking forward to getting there eventually. Not there yet. The issues you mention are important. People are very anxious about mortgage, cost of living, things like that. I understand all of that. But what this study shows is not just that they're anxious about those things, but that their underlying views on certain matters have moved much more to the left and are much closer to younger people than they are to older people. And I think half of the reason for that is that nobody is actually articulating the case for a conservative values society in this country anymore.
What does that mean, conservative value society?
Well, we know what it means. We know.
Well, no, a lot of people don't know what it means.
Well, that's true. But I suppose you're right. That's the point I'm making. A lot of people don't know what it means, and people aren't making the case for a society in which you have responsibilities to look after yourself and your family, not just social responsibilities, not the state to look after everything, that hard work is really important, that savings are important, and that you can't look to the state to do everything for you. Also, of course, a lot of people have been distracted. We're going to come to this later on LTNs, and they've been very alarmed by the extravagant and unjustified language being used by a lot of the Green Wing, which suggests that there is an immediate crisis or an emergency that they've got to do something about. And I think that I don't see anybody out there from the government actually making a case for a conservative society, and they haven't done so for years. So it's hardly surprising people drift off and believe the things they are being told when they're not being given the other side of the case.
Yes, I believe in typical conservative values, if you want to call them that, personal responsibility, small state, tough law and order and all the rest of it. But many people will be watching this. They might share, you know, in principle, Laurie, there's values, but they're shouting at the screen going, yes, Michelle, I would love to be responsible for myself. I would love to have savings, but the cost base that people have, their mortgages, obviously inflation, all the rest of it, it's making it to the point that even if you wanted to have conservative values, you perhaps would struggle now.
Yeah, I mean, the Conservatives made choices over the last 12 years that made this country less secure and us less safe to things like the energy shock that we're experiencing at the moment. So what's happened as time has gone on is that's affected a wider and wider segment of society. It's starting to impact those who have managed to save a lot, who have got a home, have got a mortgage and so on. And looking at the data, we've got people who are talking about things around the cost of living, the fact that their pay has been suppressed. A really big finding that came out in the report is that you have a lot of people who are in this slightly blurry age bracket of what we call middle age now, who are saying that they wanted more control in the workplace. They don't feel they have enough power, for example, and they feel that that's bouncing back and hitting their pay. And they're worried about the fact that their public services, the education, the hospital services they have the right to, because they paid into the system, have suffered from chronic underinvestment. So decisions that were made to underinvest in this country, that made it less secure, are starting to blow back against people who, in the past, may have been more economically secure. And I see it as no surprise that that is leading to people to want to move away from the Conservative Party.
I wonder, where will you go if you are someone that's listening to this and you're in agreement with what you're hearing, you're less likely perhaps to go Tory at the next election. Where will you go then? Will you go anywhere at all? Will you turn out and vote? Or will you just say, you know, no, I'm not bothering next time? By the way, you say your first point that you made was about energy security in this country. You say about the last 12 years of the Tories. Many would say, hang on a second, the reason that we're in the situation with the energy is not the failings of the people in power of the last 12 years, but it's gone beyond that. It's many successive governments that have failed us. And now we're reaping the, well, not reaping the rewards, we're reaping the consequences of that failure, I suspect. Where do you think these people will go then, Daniel? If less likely to go Tory, then where?
Well, we do know that things like this, disillusionment with the existing political parties, does have an effect on turnout, and that there will be people who will simply stay at home and curse on both of you or all of you or whatever it is, and I'm not going to vote, because they feel their vote doesn't make a difference.
I'm going to be one of them.
I think there'll be, I would discourage that, because I think it's very important to exercise your vote, even if from a list of people whom you don't really approve of, because it is the most valuable democratic right you've got, and the right of participation. So I would encourage you to cast your vote, Michelle, even if you find it difficult to find a party. There'll be one out there that'll be less bad than the others, and I think you should. I'm not saying who it would be for you, but you make your own choice. But I think you should cast your vote. But leaving that to one side, some people, I think, will not cast their vote. Some people, of course, will go to the Labour Party, because Keir Starmer is, you know, he's sort of trying to sweep them up. The big interesting question is whether any of those will go to a new party or a fringe party, and what effect that's likely to have. And I don't know the answer to those questions.
A lot of you are getting in touch, by the way, about this middle-aged thing. I do not believe that you're middle-aged in your 40s. I might be statistically wrong, and I don't know, whatever, but yeah, it feels very odd to me. What do you think that Labour will stand to gain from this Tory disillusionment?
Yeah, and I think the polls show that, right? People who have experienced one of the hardest periods in recent memory. They're looking at a party that seems to have an endemic problem with behaviours that border on or are outright corruption. You got a guy who was Chancellor who, you know, accidentally missed £5 million on his tax return while people are at home trying to afford their bills, and then being also told by the Prime Minister that they're going to have to inevitably pay more tax. The whole edifice is crumbling of competence and hypocrisy. And you were talking earlier about energy. I totally agree with you about energy policy over time, but it was a choice made in the 2010s to suppress wages, say, in the public sector. And you would have found yourself now down the line where many people who are in this age bracket we're talking about would have had a bit more money to be able to withstand themselves working hard and building up their own self-dependency instead of relying on the state, withstand the shocks that we've been through. But it was a political choice to suppress those wages at a time that wasn't as unstable as it is now. So I think if you look at the polls, I mean, one that came out, I think, the last couple of days showed Tories being almost completely decimated at the next election. I don't think that's surprising.
Well, I talk about suppressing wages. You know, the 2010 government inherited a total financial crisis from Gordon Brown and behaved in a way that tried to be sensible about public finances. And you can criticise at the margins, you know, should you have been a little bit higher, a little bit lower? I can understand, that's what politics is all about, having that argument. I understand that. But the idea that there was, you know, what you're describing as suppressing wages, I call fiscal good sense. I just want to make a quibble about what Laura said about the polls. When we see those polls that come out, and I agree they show a huge lead for Labour, of course they do, that's what they show, I'm not arguing about that. But by the time we see those numbers, they have, of course, removed from them the people who are not voting. So
some polls. Yeah.
So what we don't see is how much, you know, how many people.
You don't see me.
But you may not be the only one. You may not be the only one, but you wouldn't know it necessarily from those leads.
And the point here is that as we get close to the election, I think, will have to have parties that have a very credible story about how we can economically renew this country. Gordon Brown did not cause the collapse of the American housing market, which led to a financial crisis. But you said it's Gordon Brown's
Labour says
economic
it all starts.
The point
it
here,
all starts in America. It all started here under Gordon Brown's watch.
The point here,
and he then spent billions saving the world, as he put it.
He wants to tell you the point. Go on. What's the point?
If you're looking towards the next general election, you've got to look at parties that have got a vision for how we renew this country economically. And it doesn't mean us getting in the same bind that we're in now, where on one side we've got chancellors avoiding taxes and giving contracts for fake PPE to people in the House of Lords, and then over here expecting us all to have to pay higher bills and not be given enough support and suffer under an NHS that didn't get investment. That story does not add up.
I do find it quite interesting, though, that when we're talking about present-day politics and governments, you know, you will say about corruption and you'll blame it all at the door of the Tories.
They're in power.
Yeah, I know. But when Daniel then talks about the situation in 2008, you immediately say, well, that was global factors. Whereas actually, some would argue that if you look at lots of the mess that's going on in this country, a lot of that are global factors. But how come you don't give credit to the global factors now, but you give all the credit to global factors then?
So this is a crucial point. Daniel said, talked about Gordon Brown's economic crisis. It came from abroad. The question is then what domestic responses are made. Now, the Labour government in the years before the 2007 crisis spent way too much time cozying up to the city, deregulating and so on, making us more vulnerable to that then shock that came globally. A similar culpability is happening here, where the Conservative government, prior to the shock coming, has made us more vulnerable.
I'll tell you what would have made us a damn sight more vulnerable as well. Anyone with a good memory will remember when we were talking about trying to come out of these lockdowns and things like that. If my memory does serve me right, and I think it does, it was Keir Starmer that was the one that was critical of us coming out of lockdown, the pace of which we were coming out. I think if he would have had his way, we would have been locked down for a whole lot longer. And of course, we are all now seeing the magnitude of consequences that came down from locking our economy down for as long as we did. Brian says, I'm 54 and I've always voted Tory, but no more, he says. I don't trust Labour or the Lib Dems, so it'll be Reform UK that gets my vote at the next general election. Peter, you say pretty much a similar thing, but you're not 54, you're a couple of years older. I'll be polite there. Lots of you are saying that you used to be Tory and that you are not anymore. Lots of you saying that you would switch to Reform. But, you know, a few months, how long have we got now till the next election? A year or so, perhaps? That is a long time in politics, isn't it? Let me know your thoughts, though. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address now. I'm going to take a quick break, but I'm going to stick with a theme, if you like, of Parliament at least, because if you were accused of sexual misconduct in the workplace, would you expect to be essentially banned from your office, your shop, wherever it is? That's what's perhaps being proposed right now to MPs, and I wonder what you make of that. it's such a complex thing, isn't it? You've got your accusation, you've got your arrest, you've got your charge. At what point should some of the consequences kick in? Give me your thoughts and I'll see you in 2.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs. This is Dewbs & Co. and we're keeping you company until 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, I've got Lord Daniel Moylan, the Tory peer in the House of Lords, and Laurie Laybourne, a policy researcher. Welcome back, everybody. We've just been talking about voting and who you will vote for, if at all, by the way, at the next general election. Kev says, Michelle, the standard of MPs on both sides is so low and pathetic that there is nobody to vote for. He says it's embarrassing. Dave has been in touch as well and saying that he will spoil his ballot with some strong choice words. I've said this often, but when you do stand for Parliament as a candidate, when you stand for election as a candidate, you gather around at the end of the count. So what happens is any kind of unclear ballots or spoilt ballots or whatever, all the candidates gather round if you're there and you have to agree, yes, this one's definitely spoiled, or it's perhaps a vote for him or her or whatever. And it is hilarious to see the messages and the scribbles and the scrawls that people have put in there. So actually, I might even be talking myself around rather than not voting. It might be more amusing to actually do something like Dave suggests, perhaps. Anyway, parliamentary committees are considering this week whether or not MPs that are accused of sexual misconduct should be banned from the parliamentary estate while the claims are investigated. It stems, by the way, there was an MP, you'll probably be familiar with it, who continued to attend Parliament whilst on trial for sexual assault. He was, of course, eventually found guilty. I'll come to you first, because you are indeed in the murky world of politics yourself. What do you think to this suggestion, barring people from the parliamentary estate? And if you agree with that, at what point?
I think it's very dangerous, because what you've got to do is avoid giving opportunities for people who maliciously make false claims. So if it was simply a question of an accusation, I could get Keir Starmer out of the House of Commons for 3 months by setting up a false accusation. There'd be people who do that straight away. They get him out for 3 months. By the time it was proved wrong, 3 months would have been lost. And during that period, his constituents would not be represented and he wouldn't be doing his job. So I think the point of accusation is not the point at which people should actually be asked to step back. I do think, I don't know about the guy who was attending, but I do think when you get to the point that you're charged, you're probably not welcome on the parliamentary estate, and you should take time off and go and conduct yourself in your trial and prove yourself not guilty if that's the case, and you've got the right to do that. But I do think that it's very dangerous if you give people an incentive, malicious people. In addition, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the accusations that have been made so far are malicious or false, but I'm saying that you would then give an incentive to people to make false accusations. And that breaks a democratic bond and does a disservice to people who need the services and support of their MP.
I had a political editor on my panel once, not that long ago actually, a couple of months ago, whatever. Many people might have seen the programme. And he said to me that he is aware of lots of MPs that have been alleged to have sexually harassed members either of their staff or other people in and around that proximity. And I asked him, well, if that's the case, why don't you report on it then? And he said to me, well, I can't because I can't prove it. These people are not willing to go on record and they're worried about the consequences. So Daniel says at the point of charge, then these people can be asked to, don't come on the parliamentary estate. But how do you get to that point of charge? Because Parliament has a huge power imbalance, right? So if I'm like, like the office admin junior, whatever, and my boss is the all-powerful MP for whatever, I would be a bit anxious because I'd think, oh, he's really powerful, no one's going to believe me. So how do you get to that point of charge if you don't have some form of ability to indicate that this person is under, investigation or whatever?
In most workplaces in the country, there's a whole set of processes, HR department and so on, that enables some kind of process of dealing with these very complex situations, right? That is, as you're inferring there, often missing in the context of Parliament. You've got a number of policies and places that people can report things, but then you've also got a situation where you have MPs who are employing these staff, and there is, as you say, a big power imbalance there. And I think that it makes it very difficult for us. You hear stories about the procedures or means of reporting not necessarily being massively useful, but then a power imbalance, a feeling basically that you will end up jeopardising your career in politics, your staff are often a bit younger, is a big disincentive to that. So I think internal to Parliament, there needs to be, and people have talked about this for a long time, a process of trying to create more structures so that staff do feel more supported, like they can speak out, and also part of a wider cultural change that does try to sort out some of these clearly quite toxic cultural elements within the context of Parliament.
I agree there's a cultural issue, but let's be clear, this power imbalance has been recognised in recent years very strongly inside Parliament, both in the Commons and the Lords. And I think you're unfair in not recognising that there have been structures very seriously put in place and compulsory training so that people can report confidentially. I don't think it's ever easy. It isn't easy if you're working in a factory or an office, because if you're complaining about your boss, you know there's going to be ructions. And that is true in Parliament as well. But I do think you should acknowledge the efforts that have been put in place to create these structures, which I think partly explains why there are so many more complaints than there used to be.
Yeah.
But if they were wholly effective, though, you wouldn't have a situation like what I had on here not that long ago, where you've got a political journalist saying on national television that he is aware of accusations and people that are behaving wrongly, but he can't stack it up. He can't do the story.
Yeah, but that's a different matter. You could have perfectly effective... Let's take an office environment, nothing to do with the House of Commons. You could have perfectly reasonable structures with HR departments, people reporting them, but it's a very different thing to say, and I'm going to go and tell the newspaper and put my face on the newspaper reporting that incident. No, but I might be willing to report it internally, but why do I want the publicity of it? That's a very different story.
Because maybe your boss is a wrong-un, and he's not just doing it to you.
Well, you might
he's
want
doing
to.
It all over the place.
You might want to do that, but I think an awful lot of people would say, I will reluctantly, because it's all very traumatic, but I will reluctantly report this because I feel I have to, on my behalf and behalf of colleagues, to the system set up by HR and so on. I'll have that processed. But I certainly don't want this being on the front of the local newspaper. But it's a totally different thing, Michelle.
Well, you see, I must confess, I've never been sexually harassed in my workplace or anywhere, quite frankly. And if I was, then I think, and it's easy to say because I'm not in that dynamic, but especially as a younger person, if you're starting out your career, you've got to start as you mean to go on. And if you've got this old pervy guy or whatever, watch my language, if you've got this boss that's behaving in a way that's inappropriate to you, you have to. I don't know where you get your courage from, but you've got to find your courage. You've got to get in front of this and you've got to stop it. You've got to start as you mean to go on. But if someone is a mass offender, a serial offender, then they should be outed. They should be convicted if it's a criminal act that they're doing. And often the only way that you can do that is by making it, I don't know, public to some degree so that people can chip in and go, yeah, he's done it to me,
The other thing is that in Parliament, at least, we are all, MPs and members of the House of Lords, are now under an obligation to report any behaviour we see like that in any other member. And if you fail to report it, we can be done for breaching the code of conduct.
No,
I agree. Laughing
at
that. We can be done for breaching the code of conduct as well. So I think I'm not defending the system as it stands, but I'm saying it's a lot better than you say. And I don't think that it's. I think there's a big difference between reporting something and wanting to have it dealt with, and expecting the protection of your employer and the structure in which you work, and going off and tittle-tattling to a newspaper about it and seeing yourself on the front of a newspaper.
I mean, that obligation should have existed for over 100 years. I mean, it's a bit shocking that obligation only is there now.
No. It isn't. It hasn't existed in the formal sense that you could actually yourself get a formal punishment and a suspension for failing to do it. As a natural moral obligation of one person to another, it's there. But nobody's been in a position to enforce it in the past. Now you can.
But is my understanding correct that when you're employed as a staffer to an MP, you're employed by the MP and not by a wide organisation? And this is where the root comes, because your boss is the person that may have done that to you. In another organisation, your employer is the organisation. It is not that one person who the allegation may be there from. And that's the problem. That's a power balance.
The complaint is not to the boss. The complaint is to the organisation, just as it would be. And it's the organisation that goes into effect to investigate the interaction.
The organisation being who?
Being the parliamentary body set up, and I slightly forget its name, the parliamentary body set up to receive these complaints and to investigate them on behalf of the Commons and the Lords.
But your contract is still, you as a member of staff, is still to the individual. It's not to the organisation. You're not employed by Parliament, right, as a body.
Yeah, I'm not sure this makes the biggest difference, as big a difference as you think. But you're right, you're employed by the MP, that's true.
Where do you stand on this? And it's very complex as well, isn't it? Because it branches out way beyond Parliament, lots of this does. Because, for example, you will have been familiar with the cases in the past where somebody, I'm not talking about politics, generally I'm talking about now, a man perhaps has been accused of sexual misconduct, whatever. He will often get named, whereas the accuser is granted anonymity. And there's been lots of cases like that recently, hasn't there, which kind of always spark the debate. Where is anonymity? Where should it be granted? What's the right process and procedures to follow in these kind of cases? Give me your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Right, do you drive a car? Chance would be a fine thing, many people will say, because yes, you can have a car, but being able to freely travel around these days is either A, difficult, B, impossible, or C, very expensive, isn't it? And there's a council now that are planning essentially to ban most cars from 75% of its roads. Really? What do you think to that? Is it all fantastic for the climate, or is it just a war on cars? Give me your thoughts, and I'll see you in 2.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight, and I've got alongside me Lord Daniel Moylan, Tory peer in the House of Lords, and Laurie Laybourne, who is a policy researcher. Lots of you guys getting in touch about that whole conversation about sexual misconduct and innocent until proven guilty, etc. Jim says, surely, until anyone's guilt has been proven, life should go on as normal. He asks, anyway, what constitutes sexual misconduct these days? It seems asking someone out for a drink would classify. All men have to do these days is look at a girl the wrong way, and he's a pervert. Innocent until proven guilty, he says again. What do you make to that? Phil says you always have to have due process. If someone's guilty, then by all means get rid of them. But you cannot just go on accusations alone. And Angie says all Tory MPs accused of anything these days seem to be immediately judged guilty by the media and Labour. It seems that these guys will not shut up until the accused life is wrecked. Do you agree with that? Keep your thoughts coming in. I'll have some more in just a few minutes. But for now, let's talk cars, shall we? Do you have one? Do you drive one? I always think chance would be a fine thing because more and more cities, towns, councils, etc. seem to be piling on the restrictions when it comes to motorists. And one council area now, get this, would see most vehicles banned from 75% of its roads within the next 3 years. This is Hackney Council, by the way. And this is all stems around the low traffic neighbourhood schemes. They are popping up absolutely everywhere, it feels like. Do you have one anywhere near you? Do you celebrate it? I don't know. You might have a cafe on there that's put chairs and whatever, you think it's great. Or you might think it's a pain in the bottom because it makes you go, goodness only knows which route now to get home. Laurie, it seems to me that there is just a war on motorists now. Am I wrong?
Well, hang on a minute. So the story that's is not correct. They're not banning 75% of cars from these roads. 75% of
No, they're making
roads,
75% of their roads low traffic neighbourhoods.
So let's define that. It's not what that infers, which is
that... I thought I did say that, but anyway.
You stopped... Yeah, so, but what is a low-traffic neighbourhood? It's not... I think the thing was about banning, wasn't it? Anyway, the point is, a low-traffic neighbourhood there is to do a number of things, one of which, or maybe even the most common of which, is to restrict the rat running that happens through certain roads, which I know I've suffered from before and I know many other people do. The road elements are still accessible by local residents and so on. The idea here is to create a different type of urban environment that doesn't mean there is as much of this congestion and poisonous air pollution that we suffer from in many of our cities. And that comes alongside a number of measures, or should, including the ability to make it safer for people to cycle, more options where they can put their bikes, and hopefully better public transport so people have a bit of an alternative. It is not banning certain vehicles or completely pedestrianising roads. That's happening in some places. This instead is about providing measures that...
But do you think that's OK? You kind of flippantly say, yeah, that's happening in some places, as though the banning of cars and the closure of roads to cars is kind of all right.
But those things aren't happening. The pedestrianisation of certain places is quite rare. Obviously, it happens. It's quite
Is it?
rare.
If you're listening, tell me near you, because I don't think it's that rare. I can think of somewhere right near me, actually, where they've closed the whole road. The cafes and restaurants have shoved their tables and chairs onto those roads, and they're entirely pedestrianised. So Laurie says it's rare. I don't think it is that rare, is it?
But the headline there was about 75% of roads having cars banned from them. That's not the case. It's trying to crack down on trying to reduce some of this congestion, some of this rat running, to make sure that the streets in which people live are safer. They don't have, for example, hire cars through apps whizzing past because that's a quick way they've discovered on Google Maps.
The way in which I used to do highways for my borough. The way in which you assess whether something is dangerous, a road is dangerous, is by looking at the accident record and seeing, have there been accidents? Most of these roads don't have accidents. They don't need to be made safer. The next thing is, we say we're doing it, you say you're doing it in the interest of air quality. We know almost nothing about air quality in London. Because we know almost nothing about air quality in London because the stations that measure air quality are very, very few in number, and they're mostly on main roads. And you do not know, the contract for them is quite limited, and you do not know, well, if you really want to know about air quality, you should be doing mobile air quality sampling. And nobody does that in London, so that you get a picture of what's happening behind the main roads, because the evidence shows what evidence there is. But if you get away from a main road, even 1 block away from a main road, the air quality improves dramatically. And many of these side roads that have been blocked off do not have an air quality problem. There's no air quality station there to show what the air quality position is. There is no evidence for any of this. And the last thing I'd say is it's socially unjust because, let's face it, on the really busy main roads where there is an air quality problem, that is very often where you find your social housing. And the leafy streets behind, where I say in most cases there probably isn't an air quality problem, we certainly don't have the evidence to say there is, they're the middle classes, and they're the ones who are piling up value on their houses, and this suits them really well. Rat running is a term people use when I want to use the public highway I've paid for, that's fine. When it's my road, and it's somebody else using it, it's rat running. So let's be absolutely clear about that. These terms are loaded, and they're a way of shifting advantage from one group to another, and it largely accrues to better off people and against those who were worse off. In addition, there's very little evidence to support it.
So he's not having any of it, basically, Laurie. What would you say back to that?
I mean, there's just loads and loads and loads of evidence.
There
about
isn't. I mean, I know the contract.
If you
I know where the sampling
on,
stations are.
Google Air Pollution London, and you will find a multitude of live maps that get, because we're talking about a London council here, live maps of where the air pollution is across London. Air pollution monitors that are outside primary schools that have given us an idea of how bad the air pollution is facing young children. The evidence about air pollution in London, you know, we've done that now, it is there, and this is an effort that might be able to deal with that. People are upset, I think, legitimately, because they feel they don't be given enough opportunity to be consulted about the introduction of some of these.
Well, a lot of them actually they were pushed in under this whole kind of COVID thing, so they didn't have a lot of the consultation, a lot of the scrutiny and all the rest of it. And before you knew it, many people just looked outside the window and had these daft plant pot things outside with very little consultation. Have you got any of these areas or these zones nearby you, and how do they work near you? Are they completely closed off to cars? Are cars allowed on there? I want your thoughts on that. Nigel says, if you pay road tax, you should be able to go anywhere on the King's Highway. You know, people are asking, do we get a refund if you've got LTNs popping up anywhere? Do we get refund on any of the kind of car road type taxes that people are paying? Lots of people as well mentioning ULEZ, bringing that up. Again, I personally, I do have a car and I use my car. I've got a kid that I transport. I've got all the paraphernalia that goes with that. And I also cycle, by the way. But I do feel that there is an attack on motorists, and a lot of it feels to me, by the way, like it's a bit of control. So many people, in my mind anyway, seem to be a little bit too power hungry, and the prospect of being able to tell somebody, no, actually, you cannot go down that street anymore is too good to pass up for some people. Ron says, he's been in touch, one of my viewers, saying to him, all of this stuff when it comes to curtailing driving, etc., feels a bit of a money-making scheme. I've got to say, Ron, I don't disagree with you on that concept at all. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some of your thoughts on those last few topics, but I also want to ask you about the channel crossings, the charities that seem to be involved these days. Do you think they are helping the situation or hindering it? Give me your thoughts and I'll see you in 2.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, I've got Lord Daniel Moylan, the Conservative peer in the House of Lords, and Laurie Laybourne, who is a policy researcher. We've just been talking about cars, low traffic neighbourhoods and all the rest of it. And in the break, Laurie was just saying, would we support road charges? No, I would not.
I'm not arguing for it. I was just asking your opinion on it.
No, would you? I just get a little bit tired of all of this stuff. I mean, you'll be right onto it, but all of this kind of net zero, all of these
Hang on a minute.
penalties, taxes on our life all the time to get to net zero. I mean, I'm sure it'll be right up your street, but
what? Hang on, but when congestion, right, and air pollution, which we do have lots of evidence about, like how do we solve those problems?
You get on your bike, go over to China, go over to India and have a word with those guys rather than doing stuff here that's a little bit extreme.
Congestion doesn't come over from China and air pollution hasn't wafted over from China.
But
These are
according to Daniel, who used to work in this sector, he's saying that air pollution, the way it's measured, etc., isn't really the issue that it's been led to believe.
I'm saying we have very limited evidence and people don't want the evidence because it would actually spoil them in their wonderful green, get us back to a primitive state, 15-minute city policy.
Don't want air pollution outside my kids' primary school.
There you go.
You walk them to school?
Yeah, there you go.
Walk them to school?
Yeah, people do walk their kids to school.
You walk them to school?
Yeah, I don't have kids yet, but if I had kids, I wouldn't. But I would want to make sure that the wider roads have not got the level of congestion air pollution they do. And we know, because there is evidence, that that is the case in many cities, that that air pollution is around schools.
The net zero conversation, the air pollution, the taxes, all the rest of it will rumble on and on. So I am going to move things on, because look at the time, everyone. It flies, doesn't it, when you're having fun? The charities that are in place to try and help this whole kind of situation about the charity crossings, the channel crossings, are they helping or hindering this whole process? The French have accused some of these charities of constantly frustrating their attempts to intercept channel migrants. I'll start with you on this one, actually, Laurie. What do you make to it? Are they helping, hindering, or what?
I mean, I think that the accusation here is that charities that are trying to engage in humanitarian support for migrants have caused some kind of problem, and it's very difficult to comment on the specific case because it's a problem between the French government and the charity. If we're trying to blow this up to a bigger thing of saying that there are loads and loads of charities frustrating the ability for us to deal with migrant crossings, I'm a bit sceptical about us making a bigger story of this.
So Laurie's sceptical.
The bigger story is that the government is failing to have a proper policy that means it's handling the people that do get into the UK and processing those claims and then giving safe routes to handle the situation where people are then trying to get into the UK.
Daniel, your thoughts?
Well, like Laurie, I don't know the facts of this particular case. The French say, and they wouldn't say it lightly, that they're causing a problem. They say they're not. I'm not there on the ground, and I can't say who's right in that. But the French sound as though they have a point, and they're asking for the government to do something about it. I don't know why. Are we funding these charities? Apparently the British government is funding some of them. Why?
Well, some of these
Why
NGOs...
are they... But the truth is, these NGOs out there, the reason they're out there, I'm sure some of the volunteers are genuinely nice, well-meaning people, but the people who are driving these charities have an agenda, and it's not just about helping people who are in need. There are plenty of people in need in this country. It's not about helping people who are in need. It's because they have a particular vision of a borderless world in which they want, which most people in this country don't accept, and they actually want to change our country, and they're not asking anybody about it. Now, what lengths they're going to in France to achieve their objective, I can't comment on. As I say, you have to rely on, you hear two sides of a story. But most people do not want this. And I think the best help they would give many of these people, not those fleeing genuine war and persecution, but those coming for primarily economic reasons, is to say, you really should go home because there are no opportunities for here. You don't want you. You're not. We let people in. We'll let people in who are genuine refugees, but we're not going to let you in. So you should go home.
What do you make to it all?
Make your own country strong.
Make your own country strong. Chance would be a fine thing, wouldn't it, for this country to be made strong? Many would say that we're going in the complete opposite direction when it comes to that. Steve has said that he is a businessman. He would love it if all the roads were pedestrianised because he owns a bar and the outside space, he says, would help the economy. He goes on to say there's no need.
Public pay for it and he gets it rent-free. Of course he'd love it.
Well, he says there's no need for cars in town. Park and ride is the way forward. Steve, have you ever tried to get on park and ride? With your bags, with your pram, with your kid, all the rest of it? I'm sure it would benefit your profit margins, let's be honest, but would it be convenient for the rest of us? You tell me. Bob says, quite simply, Michelle, charity begins at home. Lots of you are saying that you feel that many charities do mean well, but they're actually now encouraging what is ultimately illegal activities. Keith, you have that exact same view as well. You're saying that many of these charities seem to be hindering, whilst you say that you accept that actually their intentions perhaps may be good. Lots of you are kind of pushing back against this whole kind of net zero thing. Many people are saying that some of the obsessions and the policies and the ambitions when it comes to this net zero seem to be money-making. Do you agree with that? I suspect that Laurie would definitely not
Someone's
agree
making
with
money
that.
from low-traffic neighbourhoods.
You say no one's making money from low traffic. What about Steve? He was just saying that he loves these low traffic things. He can make it thing. And the council, I suspect, if you've got a low traffic neighbourhood, I bet my bottom dollar you've got fines that are being meted out for these low traffic neighbourhoods, and I bet they're making a small fortune. Yeah. Anyway, you tell me where you stand on it. That is all I have time for. Thank you, gents. Thank you to you at home. Have a fantastic night, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Dry for many of us over the next 24 hours with light winds and with clear spells overnight as well. There'll be a touch of frost by dawn on Friday. High pressure is extending its influence from the west, and under this ridge of high pressure, we're going to see clear spells.